What was it like back home during the war? You know, as someone that was obviously not in World War II, like
Right.
the combat, how was it back home?
Everybody back home was very much in what was going on, everything that was going on. Um, I was just a young 12-year-old and from a family of 6 children. After dinner, we sat at the dinner table, had the radio turned on, and we all listened to the war news. I mean, every single one, old and young. So we knew what was going on. We had some friends who were in the service, had stopped by to see my dad before he went off. And so we would think of them all the time. We had uncles in the service. One was gassed in the First World War. So we knew of soldiers and kind of knew what they had to endure. My father wanted to go in the service. He had been in the First World War and had been in the Navy. So even though he was 43 at the time, he went and wanted to sign up, and they said, no, you're not only too old, even though he was in excellent condition, they said, you have too many children and we don't want losses like that. So they turned him down. But we were all involved in the war effort of collecting silver. We had every stick of gum was wrapped with silver foil, and we would peel it from that stick of gum and start making little balls of silver, and they grew and they grew. Every time you could find anything anywhere, that went on that ball. And so it was kind of a little competition. How big is your ball? We collected newspapers, tin cans, all of those things. Our car was up on big blocks, and of course tires taken off and tried to preserve them. There's no gas. They had stamps for gas if you wanted to get fuel, and you couldn't get much. And they had stamps for you to get sugar. It was rationed according to how many were in your family. You get that. As many books as you had, 6 children. Mother was very good at food and rationing and stretching things out. My father was a stamp collector. He kept all of his stamp books that came to him with his allotment for his stamp collection. So Mother had one less book to use. But that didn't matter, Things like that you overlooked. They were small problems concerned to the bigger thing that was going on. There were stamps that were sold in school. You could get the saving stamps, either 10-cent ones or 25 cents. And you had your little books. And once a week, you would take your money in, and the teacher could sell you stamps depending on how much money you had. So that was very big.
There were defense savings stamps, from which if you
would save them, and they cost $1875
for a bond,
for one bond. So you would turn in, when the book was full, you would turn it in, and it was now worth $25. So everybody was buying saving stamps, whether you had money for it or not. Everybody was into the effort. The Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts did things that would help in helping encourage people to buy the stamps. We had Poppy Day, and the Scouts would sell poppies, and the dollar for the poppy would go into the defense fund. Red Cross was very, very much involved, and the Scouts and other organizations would be there helping roll bandages and do things. I think Herb's mother went to one of the churches, and they were all rolling bandages to send into the war zones.
And knitting socks and things.
So that was, everybody was totally immersed.
I still have 2 of the savings bonds.
Wow.
Never turned them in for the $25.
Yeah. And did you see a lot of, I know when people talk about World War II, and was there a lot of women that have to go into work to fill this?
Oh, yes.
Was that how was that? Did that affect you at all, or your family?
It did. My mother was called in to help. She was an extraordinary cook and chef. And so she was working at a bakery. After the war, because of her knowledge that they knew she had been working, she was called into Lehigh University kitchens, and she was the bakery chef. Even with the family at home, they may do,
Yeah.
Everybody is willing to help. We did the work in the household because she had been called in. My dad was asked to give up his shop, automotive parts, and he was called in because he was too old to fight. He was called to go into the steel company, and he was a bookkeeper or accountant there. So you changed your jobs, you didn't even talk about it. You just did it.
So they just told you where to go, and that's what you did?
You did it.
They delegated
You did it, yeah.
Wow.
They were happy to be able to be a part of it.
Yeah.
After the war, a funny thing is that everybody was so happy and celebrating however they could. My dad decided he was going to take the whole family down to Atlantic City to see the ice capades. So he borrowed my uncle's car. So we had 2 cars to go down. My brother drove one and Dad drove the other. 6 children, a mother and dad, and we all fit into these 2 cars. They didn't have seat belts then.
Oh, no.
So any way you could get in and sit down on people's laps, you were there. So we planned to go down in the morning, get there to the show in the afternoon, and then come home in the evening. And this was just before school started. It was the weekend before school started. So we got in the car and got on our way. And it wasn't very long before we had a flat tire. So, this is when they had the balloon tubes inside a rubber outing. All right. So my dad got out and we fixed the tire. And you get a patch from a little container and you put a piece of this soft, it's thicker than a balloon, but it's that kind of rubber patch, and you cut it to shape and put it on. And
you have to find a hole first.
Wait, oh yes, finding the hole. You have to put the rubber tube in immerse it in some kind of water.
Yeah.
And you can see it bubble because the air will show the bubbles. So they found that, and then they patched it. And okay, we barely got started when the tube went down again. This happened about 14 times on that trip.
My goodness.
We were in and out of gas stations, repairing this tire and this tire and buying whatever they happened to have in the gas station. He would buy it, whether it was the right size to fit on the car or not, to get down there. It was
Yeah.
Pretty stressful, you can imagine.
Didn't they fill at least one tire with
On
sand?
the way back, on the way back, they finally filled the one tire with sand to blow it up and put it in that casing. We did get there, but it was probably the latest show in the whole day. And of course, coming back, we drove all night with the tires going up and in and out of gas stations. It was.
Oh gosh.
It was the trip of a nightmare.
Yeah.
It was.
I'd probably tell you some
We
patience.
got back about 7:00 the next morning, and of course, none of us had slept all night, and so we didn't have to go to school the first day of school. That was awful because I never missed school. I had 100% attendance. Not that year. But that's the things that happen to you and what people try to do to make the best of life.
Yeah.
Go back to their original jobs, most of the people. And
it's interesting. I don't know if you've read about this, but the country was united and they were turning out stuff unbelievable. At the Battle of Leyte Gulf, we had 25 aircraft carriers. Now, not the gigantic ones, but 25 ships that could fly airplanes off of it. They took commercial ships and put the flat tops on them. In just one battle, we had 25. And they were turning out submarines, I think maybe once a month or something like that. It just was unbelievable.
The war and the change with the women going in to work on welding and doing the men's jobs, that actually was the change in the country where women were in the workplace. They got their opportunity to get out of the home and do what they wanted to do.
So how was it being a woman back then? Was there, we always hear about women in World War II.
Yeah, but she's a child, so
I
it's
was
hard
just
to...
You were just a kid.
I never experienced any kind of a problem.
Yeah.
Although some of our classmates at college, Herb knew of one girl who wanted to get into engineering. And
that was after the war,
After the war.
Yeah. Now all the soldiers are coming back, and that made a difference.
And that made a lot of competition.
It was a shame
for
because
male things.
Really bright girls. Yeah. One went down to Drexel and got in the line to be an engineer. And they told her she was in the wrong line, and she insisted not. And they brought some higher guy up and told her that she couldn't go in. It's sad. Yeah. And that was not the only one I knew of. But I had taken physics in high school, and a young girl, her name was Betty Bunty, had been in elementary school with me. And she was the only woman in that physics class. After the war, I was walking down the main street in Bethlehem, and there she was with her mother. She had become an engineer at the Boeing aircraft plant. And she succeeded where a lot of others didn't get that high. But I mean, the women were working all over the place by that time.
How did Rosie the Riveter play a big part in your life at all? Was Rosie the Riveter really as big as my generation has learned it to be, or is it just kind of like a small part?
No, it was a big part, but not in our personal lives. She was too young to know about that. I didn't even know.
At the time I graduated from or went to college, the only things we ever thought of was, we were going to get married after we went to school. And those who did go to college usually thought, I'll probably be a nurse or a teacher. You never even thought of other opportunities. And yet once we got out, we were accepted and we were looked at. And, finally they found women had a lot of brains.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Definitely.
Real quick.
that was the change. Lots of changes.